Devin Nunes has won one of the first battles in his lawsuit against Twitter, and I'm really surprised. Now, let me just say, because there's legal issues here, I'm not a lawyer. I know very little about this, so I could be wrong on a lot of these issues. But it seems like Devin Nunes has pulled a very clever move against Twitter in suing them over parody accounts. Now, I disagree to an extent with this, but actually, let me just slow down and break this down for you. Twitter is biased against conservatives, period. The best example is that they have a rule stating if you misgender someone, you can be banned. It's against the rules. If conservatives don't believe in the idea of misgendering, well, then you've made a rule that only targets them, okay? Now, this is all going back to my argument with Jack Dorsey, or a conversation, and Joe Rogan and all that, where we talked about bias, and he didn't seem to understand this. But, I think he got it when I told him. So here's what's going on. You guys know Devin Nunes, conservative guy. There was a parody account, a cow called Devin Nunes' cow or something, and his mom. And he wanted to stop them. Now, I disagree. I think people are allowed to parody you. The issue is, it is a political tactic, but at the end of the day, so what? Free speech, First Amendment. But something clever happened. Devin Nunes didn't sue Twitter for defamation. You see, under Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act, you can't. He sued them for negligence. This is really, really interesting. And he won the first phase. Like, they're moving forward. Now, here's why it's so important. They're going to enter discovery. Now, we'll see if Twitter actually produces any documents at all. Because it seems that Nunes wants a ton of documents. But there's so much to go through here. Let me slow down. What this means is that if there is evidence of a bias against conservatives, Nunes will get access to it. He just simply needs to make that demand. We'll see if it gets, approved or granted or whatever. But for the most part, they're moving forward, and discovery is the next step. Not only that, it's in Virginia that apparently doesn't allow an immediate right of appeal. Meaning, Twitter, welcome to the ball game. You might have to produce a bunch of information, and this might reveal Twitter knows it has a bias. And this could be really, really damaging, not just in the sense that conservatives might finally get a look under the, behind the curtain, but if Twitter's misled the public in statements to Congress or in public statements, and it turns out behind the scenes they're saying something different, which I'd have to assume is likely true, they're going to be in serious trouble because they're a publicly traded company. So check this out. This is from McClatchy, DC Bureau. What's next in the Devin Nunes' lawsuit against Twitter fake cow? Now, I got to stress, man. When it was announced he was suing over this parody account, I was like, seriously? People are allowed to parody you. But he's suing Twitter for negligence and saying they allow defamation to continue. The core issue is not that it's free speech. The core issue is that Nunes is saying you are selectively enforcing your rules and allowing this person to impersonate my mom, the mother account, even though it's a violation of your own policies. Take a look at AOC Press. You remember that account? Somebody made a Twitter account called AOC Press, and it was a parody account that said parody on it. It said AOC Parody, and it posted silly things. Banned. And they banned the dude who ran it, a conservative guy. Devin Nunes' mom, no problem. You see, this is what he's suing for. It's not about defamation. It's about asymmetrical enforcement of rules, saying you are negligent in enforcing your own rules, which allows defamation to continue. And the court said, yeah. So basically what happens is, here's my understanding. I think, Nunes is suing in Virginia because this one woman who wrote on her LinkedIn that she smears people for a living, she's a political consultant, lives in Virginia, something like that. Twitter tried arguing that it's undue expense for them to fight this in Virginia because they're based in California. And the judge said, that's absurd. You operate in 200 countries. I think you can handle Virginia. But then the judge requested some information, and something happened where Twitter absolutely refused. So the judge said, fine, we're moving forward. Let me just read this story. Let me read this. They say, Rep. Devin Nunes' lawsuit against Twitter is moving forward in Virginia, but expect more legal challenges to unfold before the California Republican gets a chance to make his case in the courtroom. Two of the defendants, Twitter and Republican political strategist Liz Mayer, on Monday said they intend to continue fighting Nunes' lawsuit in Virginia's Henrico County Circuit Court. Last week, Judge John Marshall dealt Twitter a setback when he rejected the company's argument that Nunes has no grounds to sue the San Francisco social media company in Virginia. Twitter argued the case had to be tried in a California court. Marshall ruled the Henrico County Circuit Court had jurisdiction because Mayer wrote tweets that were critical of Nunes while she was living and working in Virginia. Nunes argues in legal documents that Twitter's alleged negligence in not removing her messages affected his reputation in Virginia. The lawsuit was the first of 5 Nunes filed this year, alleging that various groups conspired against him when he was chairman of the House Intelligence Committee. Now, it's not just that, we're going to move forward and there's potential discovery here. What's absolutely fascinating, and I could be wrong about this, I am not a legal scholar, is that this decision to move forward is a slight precedent, essentially. It's not like a real precedent, but they're saying something interesting. So in Washington, D.C., political affiliation is a protected class. There are various protections in various areas. In fact, gender identity in New York City, not recognized nationwide, but in many states. The reason this is interesting is that if the place you make the tweets matters, then that potentially has an impact on whether or not Twitter would be able to enforce their rules. Again, I could be wrong, but the way I see it is, if he's arguing that Virginia has jurisdiction over this dispute, would it not hold true then if you're in Washington, D.C., and post something in support of a political group and get banned for it, would D.C. not have jurisdiction? And if that's the case, wouldn't D.C. enforce the rules and say, you are operating in Washington, D.C., yes, Twitter, you are. Therefore, you must abide by Washington, D.C. law. So let's say you have the Pepe party, right? And you're posting all of these memes and Twitter bans you for it. And you say, hey, all of these are political messaging. It's all in line with our party. Would D.C. then say, hey, in our jurisdiction where you operate, you can't ban this? That's an interesting question. Now, I've talked to some lawyers about this before. And typically the response I've gotten is, it is an interesting argument, but there has to be a suit, right? There has to be a challenge. So one of the things that I was told by a couple different lawyers was that people need to start suing Twitter, challenging Section 230 and pushing out and trying to find those cracks in the system. And this is what we have now. The judge saying it's not a violation of Section 230 because he's not suing you for defamation. So if you're not familiar, Section 230 says you can't hold Twitter accountable for what someone else says. Fine, we agree. However, Twitter has rules and allows these accounts to operate with impunity in violation of the rules. That is negligence, and therefore Twitter has a responsibility if they're not going to enforce their own policy rules. So we're moving forward. Now they do mention discovery. It's about a talking cow. Let's jump to the discovery portion, because discovery is when you get access to documents, chat messages, travel logs. So it's interesting. Devin Nunes is actually asking for a ton of information, like a lot, like an asset list for this woman, Liz Mayer. So let's read this. They say Ryan C. Young, the president of the Henrico County Bar Association, said Twitter and Mayer have options. He believes their next move would be to file another attempt at dismissal that essentially would argue Nunes doesn't have a case. They'd attack this on him being a public official, so the standard is higher, and basically say, so what, to his allegations, Young said. I mean, it talks about a cow who's going to take it seriously. Hold on. It's also a parody of his mom. Now that's different. Having, account whether people know it's real or, drinking coffee, whether they know it's real or not, is not a joke cow. But listen, I will make sure it's absolutely clear. I don't know what you should or shouldn't do in terms of fighting back. I do know people are allowed to make parody accounts of you, and welcome to America. It's called the First Amendment. The challenge, I guess, is how do you solve for political smears and hits? I guess you don't. This is one of the big problems we have. You are allowed to falsely frame and even lie in many circumstances. That's the First Amendment. Now, this is why I'm not a free speech absolutist. Defamation and smears are not protected in that you can sue over them. But I believe it's New York Times v. Sullivan, a lawsuit that set precedent saying there's a higher standard for a public official. That's what they're trying to say. Hey, everyone's going to smear you. Sometimes you get it wrong. You can't hold us accountable for that. That's kind of the argument. But saying, I mean, it talks about a cow who's going to take it seriously is clearly reductive and ignores the rest of his suit. Twitter and others will likely be able to continue delaying Nunes' discovery requests unless Marshall orders them to produce documents, according to Young, which he has not done. Twitter's lawyers have complained to Marshall that Nunes' discovery requests are particularly extensive, and that's the point. I don't think Nunes cares about the cow. I don't think Nunes cares about the parody accounts at all. I think he's a conservative looking at this saying, how do we get discovery? What can we do to find a crack in the system so that Twitter is forced to turn over documents? Well, they found it. Negligence. So he sues for the parody stuff. It might not win in the long run, but at least they've made it. They've made it now, it seems, to discovery. And whether or not the judge orders the documents, we'll see. But Nunes has gone nuclear. Check this out. He's asking for documentation of any time a Twitter employee has gone to Virginia since 2014. What? Why? All information related to the parody accounts at Devin Cow and at Devin Nunes' mom, including phone numbers and all their tweets, messages, likes, and retweets, and Mayor's tax returns dating back to 2016 and a report of her assets and liabilities. I'm going to tell you why I think this is. The messages between these parody accounts might show a coordinated effort to smear and potentially break the law. There's going to be private DMs between these accounts, and they're going to be saying things. You might find someone say, hey, Nunes wants to do this. Why don't you lie and say this? Hey, make it seem like this. No, he doesn't really want to do that, but who cares? Say this anyway. You don't know. We don't know. And that's why this is so potentially damning. More importantly, what about any, I don't know if he's asking for this, but what about any instance in which Twitter internally discussed the matter and a refusal to enforce their own rules? This is where things get interesting, because you might uncover information that Twitter was misleading the public. Maybe not. It's all speculation. The point is the door has been opened. Nunes, this is a huge win for conservatives. So, I mean, they then bring up Johnny Depp. I don't care. They say the 6-page decision by Marshall partially relied on another case garnering some public spotlight, the case of Johnny Depp suing Amber Heard, his ex-wife. Heard wrote an op-ed for the Washington Post in December 2018 about her experiences with domestic abuse and the societal backlash. She didn't name Depp, but Depp's lawyers argued she implied through the op-ed that Depp was a domestic abuser. Since the Washington Post servers are located in Virginia, Depp's lawyers argued the case belonged in the state. Heard argued that she had written the op-ed in other states and had not even directly communicated with any Washington Post employees when submitting it through a third party, so she moved to dismiss the case in Virginia. Judge Bruce D. White ruled earlier this year that because publication occurred in Virginia, the state was the proper venue for the case. The Washington Post distributes newspapers in Virginia and is widely read there. Marshall cited that decision in ruling that his court had jurisdiction over Mayor and her tweets. Nunes in Virginia is also suing McClatchy. Oh, wow, the parent company of the Fresno Bee. Wait, aren't I reading McClatchy? I am. This is McClatchy. He alleges that the newspaper article about an employee's lawsuit against a company in which Nunes had a limited partnership defamed him. Okay, so I'm going to wrap it up there. You get the point. Things are moving forward, and we may get to see behind the curtain at Twitter. Does this mean we're guaranteeing anything? It doesn't, but it could result in some particularly embarrassing information. And if he wins, regardless of discovery, it could set precedent that Twitter and other platforms are negligent in refusing to enforce their rules. That will dramatically change the landscape for everyone. That includes conservatives. Expect to see way more people getting banned, way more suspensions, way more restrictions of speech. So I'm not a fan of that. I'm not a fan of that at all. And I think people should be allowed to parody whoever they want. But regardless, Nunes is winning on this part. We'll see what happens in the future. Stick around. I'll have updates in this story as it comes. Next segment will be at 1 p.m., and I will see you all then.